The hiss of the espresso machine masked the low murmur of voices in the break room. Zora Daniels sat in the far corner, her lunch unopened in front of her. She wasn't hungry, not today. Not after what she'd just overheard from behind the supply closet door. "What I told them the trial's dirty, it targets predominantly black zip codes," one voice had said, firm, male, annoyed. Another voice replied, lower, tense, "Keep your damn voice down, we'll scrub the data. No one's looking there anyway." Zora hadn't moved. She barely breathed. The two voices belonged to her superiors, executives from the clinical testing division of Dynexia Pharma, a billion-dollar pharmaceutical company with a spotless public image and the slogan, "Curing tomorrow today," the very place she worked. Zora's fingers trembled slightly as she unwrapped her sandwich. It tasted like sawdust in her mouth. She'd just finished analyzing some of the trial demographics earlier that week. Why hadn't she noticed? She'd been at Dynexia for 11 months, her first job after earning her master's in data science. They recruited her fast, offering her a good salary, benefits, and the chance to make real change. As one of the few black women in her department, Zora knew she had to move carefully. She was used to being the only one who looked like her in a room, used to coded language, used to being asked, "Where are you really from?" But this wasn't microaggression. This was evil. Across the break room, her manager, Mr. Givens, walked in, white, mid-40s, with a self-satisfied smirk that never seemed to leave his face. "Zora," he said, all fake warmth, "didn't see you in the 10:30 meeting." "I had to finish the liver enzyme tracking models for trial 14, she replied quickly, eyes locked on her sandwich wrapper. Good girl," he said, in that way that made her skin crawl. "You'll send me a report?" She nodded, even as her chest tightened. That trial 14, was the one being tested in predominantly black and Latino neighborhoods. She'd noticed elevated mortality rates in 2 subgroups, but had been told the anomalies were due to pre-existing conditions. Now she wasn't so sure. Mr. Givens poured himself a coffee and left, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and moral rot. Zora tossed her sandwich into the bin and walked briskly back to her cubicle. The open floor plan buzzed with noise, keyboard clicks, phones ringing, white noise machines humming. Rows of mostly white analysts stared at monitors under fluorescent lights. She sat down and reopened the database for trial 14. Her screen filled with rows of patient IDs, timestamps, blood work markers, side effects. At first glance, the numbers didn't scream anything unusual, but she drilled deeper, filtering by trial location, then by ZIP code, then by ethnicity. Her breath caught in her throat. Of the 1,200 participants across 4 cities, 86% were black or Latino. Most lived in low-income areas. She clicked through to the adverse effects log. Severe reactions were nearly double in those same zip codes. And yet, in the final report submitted to the oversight board, those reactions were lumped together with milder side effects: fever, fatigue, dizziness. Nowhere did it mention liver failure, seizures, or the 2 recorded deaths she now saw with time-stamped incident codes. Her heart pounded. This wasn't a mistake. This was systematic. She leaned back in her chair, the hum of the office now distant and hollow. For years she'd watched how stories of medical racism came and went in the media. Henrietta Lacks, the Tuskegee experiment, forced sterilizations. But this was happening now, right under her nose. She knew what came next. Step 1, stay calm. Step 2, back up the data. She plugged in her encrypted flash drive. Her screen blinked as she copied over the files. She created a folder titled Church Budget 2022, a name no one would click twice. Just then, an email popped up from Givens. Subject: meeting at 3 p.m. Bring your trial 14 data. Zora felt the walls closing in. She deleted the pop-up and finished backing up the files. Then she slipped the flash drive into the side pocket of her purse, zipped it tight, and headed to the restroom. Inside, she splashed cold water on her face. Her reflection stared back at her. Dark eyes, braided hair pulled into a bun, wide cheekbones. She looked the same, but everything had changed. Her phone buzzed. A message from her best friend Aliyah lit up the screen. "Girl, you off work at 6? Got big news." Zora typed back quickly. "We need to talk. It's serious." Then she slid the phone into her pocket and whispered to herself, "Don't panic. Just think." But it was hard to think when your world was suddenly full of shadows. As she exited the restroom, she passed the hallway that led to the executive offices. Givens's door was cracked open. She paused. "Are the Daniels girls sharp?" a voice inside said. She might have seen the liver numbers. Another voice, a woman this time, replied, "We'll repackage the data. She doesn't know what she's looking at." Zora didn't wait to hear more. She walked away, heart hammering, back to her desk. By the time 3 p.m. rolled around, she had already made up her mind. She would go to the meeting, play dumb, act like she didn't know a thing. But she would not stay quiet. Not for long. Zora Daniels sat in the small conference room with her back straight and her face unreadable, just the way her grandmother had taught her. "Keep your eyes wide and your mouth shut until you know who's lying," she used to say. That voice echoed now as Mr. Givens strode in with 2 other men from corporate. "Zora," he said with a practiced smile, "thanks for joining us." She nodded politely. "Of course." The 2 men behind him didn't introduce themselves. One was thin with pinched lips and a grey laptop. The other wore a navy blue blazer and never made eye contact. Givens gestured to the small table. "We'd like to go over the trial 14 projections. I understand you've been running the data." Zora opened the sanitized version of her file, the one from the company's shared drive, the one that omitted all the flagged adverse reactions. "Yes," she said, scrolling. "The projections assume a 5% margin of side effects and a 90% compliance rate from participants." Blazer Guy finally spoke. "Can you confirm there's no indication of increased mortality or serious adverse events from the low-income zip codes?" Zora didn't blink. "Not in this version of the data set." He narrowed his eyes. "This version?" She shrugged, tapping the screen. "This is the sanitized file from the internal report system. I believe that's what you asked me to bring." Pinched lips quickly typed something. Givens shifted in his seat. "Zora, I want to be clear. Anything you find or hear that causes confusion, bring it to me first. We wouldn't want you misinterpreting raw data or making assumptions about sensitive trials, you understand?" It was a threat, dressed up in corporate speak, but a threat all the same. "I do," she said calmly. The meeting continued for 20 minutes, but the real conversation was already over. They were watching her now, she knew that. They were nervous, and that meant she was right. That night, Zora didn't go home. She met Aliyah at a quiet little diner just off 14th Street, a place with good lemon pie and bad lighting. "What's going on?" Aliyah asked as soon as they were seated. Her long braids were pulled into a high bun, and her eyes sparkled with concern. Zora pulled the flash drive from her purse and placed it on the table like it was a loaded weapon. Dynexia's been testing a drug, Trial 14, on mostly black and brown folks in poor neighborhoods, and they're hiding the side effects. There are deaths, Lee. Deaths. Aliyah blinked, then reached across and gripped Zora's hand. "You sure?" "I've got the data." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Aliyah said, We can't go to the media yet, not without backup. They'll spin you like crazy, make you look like a disgruntled employee. Zora nodded. I need more evidence. And we need someone on the inside. Zora leaned back. I might know someone. His name was Eric Langston, an internal systems analyst with quiet eyes and a serious manner. Zora had worked with him once on a back-end integration. He was smart, discreet, and black, which meant, like her, he had probably seen too much and said too little. She found him in the tech wing the next morning. Can we talk? He led her to the server closet, where the hum of machines masked their voices. They're watching you, he said without preamble. Word is someone pulled raw mortality logs for trial 14. That someone was you. Zora didn't lie. I need access to the scrub logs, the ones that show who changed what and when. Eric hesitated. That's above both our pay grades. I'm not asking you to send it, just leave it where I can see it. He sighed. Zora, they bury this stuff for a reason. You poke around too hard, they'll bury you too. I know, she whispered. But people are dying. That night, when she checked her secure cloud folder, a new subdirectory appeared. Archive 147A/internal delta edits. Inside were logs of data manipulation, including timestamps and employee IDs. She followed the chain backwards and found something chilling. 5 weeks ago, the original dataset showed 8 deaths in a 10-day window, all black participants from the Chicago test group. Within 48 hours, the deaths had been reclassified as non-trial incidents, citing pre-existing conditions. Then came a memo, short but damning. Ensure all revised data reflects minimized AE counts for presentation to the Ethics Oversight Board. This drug is our future, don't kill it with noise. GBGB was Gregory Blaine, Senior Vice President of Clinical Affairs, her boss's boss. She forwarded the logs and the memo to Aaliyah. Minutes later, her phone rang. You've got proof, Aaliyah said. Real proof. Yeah, Zora whispered, and I think they know I have it. The next morning, Zora's ID badge didn't work. She tried the back entrance. Nothing. An intern passed by and said, Security's looking for you. Zora didn't run. She walked straight to the security desk, where 2 uniformed men stood next to a woman in a sharp red blazer. The woman smiled without warmth. Ms. Daniels, we've received a report of unauthorized data transfers. Your access has been suspended pending investigation. What data transfers? That's confidential. So am I being terminated? The woman's smile widened. Not yet. They let her leave, but only after searching her bag. The flash drive was gone, hidden safely with Aaliyah. But Zora knew what this was, the beginning of war. As she stepped out into the bright morning light, her phone buzzed with a new message. Don't worry, we've got your back. E.L. Eric. She turned her face to the sun and closed her eyes. They'd buried the files, but she had unearthed them, and now she was going to make them heard. You really think people are going to believe me? Zora asked, her voice tight as she paced back and forth across Aaliyah's apartment. Aaliyah sat cross-legged on the couch, laptop open, phone buzzing with notifications. Z, you have the files, you have the audit logs, you even have that memo. This isn't just a hunch anymore, it's corporate manslaughter. Zora stopped pacing. Then why is it so damn hard to get anyone to listen? Earlier that day, they'd sent a confidential tip to a mid-tier health investigative journalist. No reply. Then another to a whistleblower website, rejected for insufficient verifiability. Finally, they called a contact Aaliyah had from her community work, a local city council member who had once promised to amplify black voices. His assistant picked up, listened briefly, then said, "We'll circle back." Zora slumped into a chair. They think I'm exaggerating, or they don't want to go up against a billion-dollar company. Aaliyah didn't argue. She just reached for her phone again. Then we stop knocking on polite doors and we go to the people. We go loud. Later that night, they uploaded a video to Aaliyah's community Instagram page. It was simple, a black screen with Zora's voice narrating. My name is Zora Daniels. I used to work for Dynexia Pharmaceuticals. They're testing a drug called Dexiline 47 on mostly Black and Latino participants in poor neighborhoods. They're hiding the side effects. People are dying. I have the files. I've seen the numbers. I won't be silent. A few minutes after posting, Aaliyah looked up from her phone. We just hit 2,000 views. Any shares? 26 so far, mostly small accounts, a few nurses. But the comments weren't all supportive. Sounds fake. If this were true, CNN would be on it. You'll stay trying to bring down what helps us. One reply stung worst of all. Ain't nobody believe some data nerd over a whole company. Zora closed her eyes. It's not enough. I'm not enough. Aaliyah leaned forward. Then we find someone who is. The next day, Aaliyah called Dr. Winston Curry, a respected black physician who ran a free clinic in South Chicago. He didn't need convincing. I've been seeing strange symptoms in patients in the trial, he said immediately. We've reported it. Nothing came of it. Dr. Curry agreed to meet them that evening at his clinic. Zora brought printed copies of the files, patient logs, AE reclassifications, the internal memo. He sat at his desk and read in silence, nodding grimly. This isn't just unethical, he finally said. It's criminal. He made a call right then to a contact in the state health inspector's office, left a message, then turned to Zora. Keep pushing, but be careful. They've silenced people before. That last sentence hung in the air like smog. 2 days later, Zora woke to find her name trending on social media, but not how she hoped. A viral article titled "Disgruntled Employee Smears Pharma Giant After Suspension" had surfaced. It was published anonymously and cited company sources. It called her a junior data analyst with a history of underperformance, and claimed she'd fabricated the documents to retaliate after being caught manipulating internal files. Zora stared at the screen in horror. They're smearing me. They're scared of you, Aaliyah countered. This means you're a threat. I just became a liability. Her inbox filled with hateful messages, some from trolls, some from strangers, accusing her of hurting the black community by undermining medical progress. One message simply read, "We know where you live." That night, she found her car keyed. On the windshield, a sticky note. You're not the hero. Zora sat behind the wheel, eyes wide, hands shaking. Her phone buzzed again. Eric. You okay? She replied. Barely. Then added, do you still have access to the internal Slack messages? A pause. Then, for now, she called him. Look for internal discussions about Trial 14 after the ethics board submission, anything that sounds like a cover-up or panic or legal prep. We need something human, something they can't fake with stats. Eric hesitated. You're getting in deep, Zora. I'm already in. The next day, Eric delivered. He found a thread from a private exec-only Slack channel. Someone named A. Trumbull had typed, if this leaks, it's Tuskegee 2.0. Shut it down. Another executive responded, then make sure Daniels doesn't leak it. They had feared her. They had named her. Zora sent screenshots to Aaliyah, who forwarded them to Dr. Curry. He sent them straight to the state health investigator, now finally responding to their messages. That same afternoon, a young intern from Dynexia messaged Zora on a burner account. She identified herself only as Mina. I'm on your side. I've seen the reports. They told us to delete all backups. I have one they missed. Mina uploaded a document marked confidential. Trial 14 risk summary. It included a statement from a former physician overseeing the study who had objected to continuing trials in high-risk black communities. The physician's name was redacted, but her words were clear. There is a pattern of serious adverse reactions linked to race-specific genetic markers. The refusal to pause or adapt the trial is gross negligence and could be construed as targeted harm. Zora didn't speak. She just forwarded the file to Aliyah. We don't just have smoke now, Aliyah said. We have fire, Zora whispered. Then let's burn it down. But still, no major news outlet called. Not even after Aliyah's video was reposted by a few activists with large followings. Not even after Dr. Curry publicly confirmed her findings. Zora stood on the edge of her apartment balcony that night, staring at the flickering skyline. Why won't they believe us? Aliyah stood beside her. Because the truth is heavy. It's easier to dismiss a black woman than to confront a billion-dollar lie. Zora's eyes narrowed. Then we'll make it so loud they can't ignore it. Aliyah smiled. Time to plan a protest. The late afternoon sun sat heavy in the sky over downtown, casting long shadows between glass towers and concrete. The plaza outside Dynexia's headquarters, usually a sterile corridor of corporate calm, was now filled with sound, feet pounding pavement, cardboard signs held high, chants rising in steady rhythm. Zora stood just behind the first row of marchers, a hooded sweatshirt pulled over her braids, sunglasses obscuring her eyes. The printed papers she had leaked, the audit logs, the memo and the Slack messages, were now blown up on poster boards, carried aloft by demonstrators chanting, "We won't be silent, we won't be silenced." Aliyah, standing at a portable mic mounted on the back of a flatbed truck, lifted her hand to quiet the crowd. They thought nobody would care. They thought nobody would listen. They thought black and brown bodies didn't matter. But we're here to say we see them and we demand justice, the crowd roared. More than 300 people had gathered, from community organizers to college students, nurses and survivors of past medical abuse. Many wore black in solidarity. Others held up photos of loved ones lost in previous trials gone wrong. The atmosphere felt electric, hopeful but taut, like the air before a storm. Zora took a deep breath. This was real. All of it. The media hadn't come in droves. A local news van hovered on the perimeter, filming without getting close. Reporters watched from a distance, unsure if this was a story or a liability. But live streams from activists flooded social platforms, and the hashtag #DexiLineKills began trending by nightfall. By 5 p.m., a wall of security guards had formed in front of Dynexia's tinted glass entrance. Their suits were tight, their expressions tighter. A few clutched radios murmuring orders to each other. Still, the protest remained peaceful. People chanted, they prayed. Some knelt in a silent row, heads bowed beneath a banner that read, "Our silence is their weapon." Then came the buses. Two large, unmarked police transports pulled up from side streets. Uniformed officers in riot gear emerged in lines, helmets on, visors down, batons out. A hush fell over the plaza as they fanned out around the crowd, forming a perimeter like a noose being drawn tight. Zora's stomach turned. Aliyah stepped forward to the mic again. "We are peaceful. We are protected under the First Amendment. We will not be intimidated." But the officers kept advancing, shields raised. One protester, a young man in a brown hoodie, raised his hands. "No weapons here, no threats, we're just telling the truth." A plastic water bottle flew from somewhere behind him. No one could say who threw it. It bounced harmlessly off a police shield. That was all it took. A blare of sound erupted as the police line surged forward. Batons cracked. People screamed. The peaceful assembly disintegrated into chaos in seconds. Zora ducked as the crowd split, people running in every direction. Tear gas canisters landed near her feet, hissing violently. She stumbled back, coughing, her eyes burning. A pair of hands grabbed her by the arms, Aaliyah yanking her toward an alley. "Come on, run!" They sprinted behind the building, flanked by others gagging on smoke and blinded by chemical mist. Somewhere in the confusion, a camera phone caught it all, an officer striking a woman with a baton even as she held up a sign reading, "We have the right to live." Within minutes, multiple arrests were made. Protesters were zip-tied, thrown to the ground, dragged across concrete. Aaliyah was one of them. Zora watched, hidden behind a dumpster, as her best friend was shoved into the back of a police van. "You can't do this! I have rights!" she yelled before the doors slammed shut. Zora couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Her whole body shook. A helicopter buzzed above, shining a spotlight down on the cracked plaza, now smeared with signs and spilled water bottles. Dynexia's towering building loomed silently over the carnage, its reflective glass glowing gold in the dying light. That night, Zora made her way to a community center a few blocks away, now acting as a temporary shelter for scattered protesters. Her face was streaked with dried tear gas. Her voice was hoarse. People she'd never met patted her shoulder, offered water, wrapped blankets around her. She sat in a metal chair under flickering lights and finally allowed herself to cry, not from fear, but rage. On a nearby television, muted footage from the protest played in a loop. The media had arrived just in time to show riots, not injustice. A talking head shook his head disapprovingly. A peaceful protest that devolved into violence, unclear who instigated. A bold chyron read, "Unrest outside Dynexia HQ. Unrest, not outrage, not truth." Hours later, Aaliyah texted from jail. "I'm okay. They booked me under failure to disperse. I'm in a holding cell with 2 others. They're scared, but strong." Zora typed back with shaking fingers. "I'll get you out." "We made noise, Z. They can't ignore us now. Keep going." Zora stared at the screen. She had come to tell the truth, and instead they painted her as a liar, a disruptor, a radical. And yet, for the first time, her voice had carried. At dawn, Zora met with Dr. Curry outside the courthouse. He handed her a manila envelope filled with medical affidavits from patients who had experienced symptoms after participating in Trial 14. Inside was also a signed statement from Mina, the whistleblower intern who had agreed to go on record. "Take this to the press again," he said. "This time, don't ask, demand." Zora took the envelope and nodded slowly. She wasn't afraid anymore. Anger had eaten her fear whole. "They tried to make us the villains," she said. "But now they'll have to answer to the people." The cell door slammed shut with a metallic finality that echoed through the cold concrete corridor. Zora sat on the bench, hands folded in her lap, back pressed against the wall. Her hoodie still reeked of tear gas and sweat. Her mouth was dry, her throat raw. Her wrists ached from the tight zip ties that had only recently been cut away. She had thought they might arrest her eventually, but she hadn't expected it to happen in the middle of the night, at her own apartment. The knock had come at 1:42 a.m., loud, relentless. "Zora Daniels," the officer had said. She hadn't denied it, she hadn't run. The charge was vague. Suspicion of inciting public disorder and unauthorized data access. Legal jargon for, "you spoke too loudly." Now she was in holding, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, with 2 other women, a tired Latina protester with bruises on her cheek, and an older black woman who looked like she'd seen too many nights in cells just like this. Zora tried to focus on her breathing. Inhale, exhale. "You're not broken. You're not beaten. Yet. Hours passed. The Latina woman, Rosa, eventually fell asleep on the far bench, curled into herself like a child. The older woman remained alert, her arms folded, watching Zora with careful eyes. "You're the one they arrested over the drug scandal," she said finally. Her voice was rough, but steady. "The whistleblower." Zora hesitated, then nodded. The woman grunted. "Thought so. I saw your video before they took it down." "You did?" She shifted slightly. "Name's Loretta. Been fighting these battles since before you were born. Civil rights, housing protests, prison reform. They don't like it when black women tell the truth." Zora offered a tired smile. "Yeah, I'm starting to notice." Loretta studied her. "You scared?" Zora thought about that for a moment. "Not the way I was. I used to be scared they wouldn't believe me. Now I'm more afraid that they'll believe me and still not care." Loretta nodded slowly. "The truth's heavy. Sometimes folks can't carry it. But you? You already picked it up. Don't set it down now." Zora felt something shift in her chest, something between gratitude and steel. Sometime in the late morning, a young public defender appeared outside the cell, clipboard in hand, looking frazzled and underpaid. "Zora Daniels," he called. She stood. "That's me." He unlocked the door and motioned her out. "I've reviewed your case. They don't have anything solid. Just accusations, hearsay, and an internal complaint from your former employer." Zora narrowed her eyes. "So why am I still here?" "Because they want you rattled," he said. "They want you scared enough to sign this." He handed her a thick envelope. Zora opened it, a legal agreement, dense, cold, clinical. At the top, confidentiality and release of claims. At the bottom, a blank line waiting for her signature. The offer was clear: walk away from the allegations, retract her public statements, and promise not to sue the company or discuss any aspect of Trial 14 again. In exchange, no charges, a payout of $85,000, and a sealed file. She stared at the paper, then looked up at the lawyer. "Who sent this?" "Dynexia's legal team. They said it was a courtesy, a way to move on." Zora laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A bribe." "I can't advise you to accept or reject," he said quietly. "But I've seen worse deals for less courage." She looked back at the document. $85,000 could pay off her student loans, buy her some peace, maybe a clean slate. But it would also mean swallowing the truth, silencing every name buried in those files. She pictured the patients, the altered reports, Aaliyah in jail, Loretta watching from the bench. Then she handed the envelope back. "Tell them to shove it." They processed her for release later that afternoon. Aaliyah was waiting outside the station, face bruised but beaming, with a large coffee and a tighter hug. "They offered you the hush money too?" Aaliyah asked as they walked down the block together. Zora nodded. "Tried to buy me quiet, but I'm louder than that." "I love you, girl," Aaliyah said fiercely. "You're dangerous now, they know it." A silver car pulled up beside them. Dr. Curry leaned out from the driver's seat. "We need to talk." At a quiet cafe tucked between office towers, Dr. Curry laid a folder on the table. "While you were inside," he said, "the state investigator began a preliminary inquiry. They've subpoenaed Dynexia's top brass. That means they're officially under investigation." Zora blinked. "It's happening?" "Yes, but it's not over. It's just beginning." Aaliyah flipped through the folder. "These are internal emails." "From a second whistleblower," Dr. Curry confirmed. "Anonymous for now, but credible. They outline conversations about hiding trial data and targeting whistleblowers. Your name's in 2 of them." Zora closed her eyes for a moment. So, they really were watching me. Dr. Curry nodded. Which means we have to push harder. You'll be called to testify. I'll be there, Zora said. He looked her in the eye. It won't be easy. The courtroom won't be friendly. They'll try to discredit you, make you look like a disgruntled employee, a radical, maybe even unstable. Zora leaned forward. They've already tried all that. I'm still here. That night, Zora returned to her apartment. She looked around at the stacks of files, the charger cords, the notes stuck to her refrigerator. It all felt different now, like the apartment belonged to someone she used to be. She pulled out her phone and opened a new email draft. She hit send. Then she recorded one final video for the public. She spoke plainly. No edits, no filter. They tried to lock me up. They tried to shut me up. They failed. My name is Zora Daniels, and I am not afraid of the truth. Are you? She stared into the camera for 5 seconds after the last word, then clicked post. By the end of the week, the name Zora Daniels had become a rallying cry. She was no longer just a former data analyst. She was now the woman who exposed the lie, splashed across independent news platforms, activist pages, and even late-night commentary. Her video, calm, direct, unshakable, went viral. Tens of thousands reposted it. Hundreds of thousands watched. Zora didn't have to speak loudly anymore. The people were doing it for her. Aaliyah and Zora sat on the floor of Aaliyah's apartment, surrounded by donated laptops, USBs, stacks of printed affidavits, and open pizza boxes. A few college volunteers tapped away at keyboards, cataloging submissions pouring in from across the country. We've got emails from nurses in Houston, case managers in Detroit, a doctor in Newark, Aaliyah reported, scrolling through her screen. All of them have seen versions of Trial 14. Same targeting, same outcomes. Zora leaned over to look. They weren't just doing this in Chicago. Nope. It was national. A second laptop chimed, a notification. Zora checked it and froze. Eric just uploaded more internal messages. She clicked through. This time, the documents included an internal risk memo titled Ethnicity-Specific Adverse Event Sensitivity. Buried within it was a line that turned her stomach. Statistically, the socio-economic status of high-risk groups reduces the likelihood of organized legal resistance. Aaliyah read it aloud, her voice trembling. They thought being poor meant being powerless. Zora exhaled sharply. They were wrong. By Monday, pressure on Dynexia mounted. The hashtag #WeBelieveZora trended globally. Multiple advocacy groups, including Doctors for Ethics and Black Health United, released joint statements supporting her. They requested immediate halts to all Dexiline 47 trials and called for criminal investigations into the company's executive board. Then came the celebrities. An actor with 5 million followers reposted her video. A Grammy-winning singer tweeted, "When black women speak truth, believe them. Stand with Zora." Even local politicians, once silent, started to speak out. Zora barely kept up. Calls poured in, interview requests, legal consultation offers, book agents, podcasters. But she ignored all of it, except for one name on her screen, Mina J., the intern. Zora answered immediately. "Hello?" "I want to go public," Mina said, voice tight but clear. "I'm tired of hiding. I was in the room when they changed the trial labels. I can't sleep. I need to tell the truth." Zora's voice softened. "You'd be putting yourself at risk. They already threatened me. I lost my job. I lost friends. But if you're brave enough to keep going, so am I." Zora didn't hesitate. I'll connect you with Dr. Curry and our legal support. You won't be alone." For the first time in a long while, she felt it. Not just resistance, but momentum. A day later, Mina held a press conference at the Community Justice Center. Small room, cheap podium. But the impact was seismic. "I was told to delete patient files," she said, voice trembling but loud enough. "I was told to deny that anyone died. They said people in those neighborhoods didn't read reports anyway." The footage was picked up by national news. For once, the story wasn't buried. Zora stood at the back of the crowd wearing her same hoodie, arms crossed. A woman tapped her shoulder gently. "Are you Zora?" Zora turned. "Yes." The woman pulled her into a hug. "My son died in Trial 14. He signed up thinking he was helping his community." Zora couldn't speak. She just held the woman and nodded as tears spilled down both their cheeks. Another woman approached, then a man, then more. Some brought photos, some brought stories, some just came to say, "Thank you." That night, Zora wrote in her journal for the first time in weeks. "I used to wonder if my voice would ever matter. Now I know. It matters because it became ours. It was never just about me. It was always about all of us." The next morning, the National Health Oversight Board released a statement confirming an emergency investigation into Dynexia. All clinical trials were ordered paused. The FDA issued a temporary suspension on Dexiline 47's pending approval. Dynexia's stock plummeted. 3 executives resigned within 48 hours. One of them was Gregory Blaine, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Zora walked into the newly arranged community legal office inside the Justice Center. The walls were lined with donated printers, court filing boxes, and posters that read, "Protect the truth. Defend the brave." Aaliyah met her at the door. "The trial date's been moved up." "When?" "3 weeks. You'll be called to testify." Zora nodded. "I'm ready." Aaliyah gave her a look. "They'll dig into everything. Your job history, your school records, your past relationships, your family. They'll try to paint you as angry, unstable, selfish." Zora didn't flinch. "They've already done that, but I'm still standing." A beat passed. Then Aaliyah pulled her into a tight hug. "You're a damn warrior." "No," Zora whispered, smiling. "I'm a witness." The night before her testimony, Zora stood outside the courthouse, watching workers hang banners and organize media barricades. Her city wasn't sleeping. Neither was she. Across the street, protesters held a candlelight vigil. They held signs bearing the faces of people who died in the trials. Someone passed Zora a candle and simply said, "We've got you." She held the flames steady. Inside her apartment later, Zora recorded one final message for the people who had followed every step of her journey. "I didn't want to be a hero. I wanted to be heard. You made that possible. No matter what happens tomorrow in court, the truth is already free. Because you carried it, you believed it, you believed me. Thank you." She ended the recording. No edits, no filters, just truth. The courtroom was colder than Zora expected. The air conditioning hummed steadily, but it did nothing to quiet the tension. Rows of pew-like benches were filled with press, advocates, families of trial victims, and Dynexia's tight-jawed legal team. Reporters scribbled notes, whispered into phones, and watched Zora like she was either a savior or a scandal. At the front, the seal of the state judicial authority loomed above the judge's bench. Judge Langston, an older black man with a no-nonsense gaze and a reputation for fairness, adjusted his glasses and scanned the courtroom. "This court is now in session." Zora sat beside her lawyer at the plaintiff's table, hands clasped in her lap, heart pounding. Across from her sat the defense, 3 attorneys in sleek suits, one of whom was Gregory Blaine's personal counsel. Blaine himself wasn't present, medically unfit for trial, they claimed. Of course. The prosecutor stood and began the case with a clear, steady voice. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not just about numbers, it's about lives, about a deliberate, documented decision by a major pharmaceutical company to misrepresent the effects of a drug trial that disproportionately targeted black and brown communities. The whistleblower you'll hear from today, Zora Daniels, did what no one else dared to do. She told the truth. Murmurs rustled through the courtroom. Zora's name echoed from the corners of the room like wind stirring a fire. The first witnesses testified. Dr. Curry spoke about the patients he'd treated. Mina, the former intern, took the stand with trembling hands but unwavering words. A mother whose son had died following the trial recounted how he'd volunteered for what he believed was a routine flu study, only to suffer liver failure days later. Each testimony painted another corner of the mural, one of deception, exploitation, and silence bought with money and fear. Then it was Zora's turn. She stood slowly, walked toward the witness box, and raised her right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Her voice didn't shake. Zora sat, shoulders square, hands still. The prosecutor approached. Ms. Daniels, can you tell the court what first alerted you to the irregularities in Trial 14? Zora described it all. The overheard conversation in the break room, the data anomalies, the scrubbed adverse event logs, the internal memo. She kept her answers factual, deliberate. Why didn't you report internally? The prosecutor asked. I did. They dismissed it. Then they tried to silence me. You submitted evidence to state investigators. Is it accurate that this included emails, internal Slack messages, and audit trails? Yes. The prosecutor walked slowly toward the jury box. Did you ever intend to harm the company? No, Zora said firmly. I intended to stop harm from happening to people who looked like me. Then the defense stood. Their lead attorney, a silver-haired man with a calm smile, stepped forward like a hunter approaching cautious prey. Ms. Daniels, he began smoothly, you were suspended for accessing internal files without authorization, were you not? Yes, Zora replied. So, would you agree that your methods in obtaining these documents were unconventional? My methods exposed deaths. If the conventional way is silence, I chose differently. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. Your job performance had been called into question prior to your suspension. Are you aware of that? Yes. Would it be fair to say you had motivation to retaliate? Zora stared at him. If exposing the truth is considered retaliation, then yes, I retaliated against injustice. A murmur rose in the gallery. The judge banged his gavel once. Order! The attorney didn't back down. You took files, you recorded conversations, you violated company trust. Zora's voice cut through the tension like a blade. They violated human trust. I didn't take those files for money or revenge. I took them because people were dying and no one was listening. The defense pressed on, but Zora didn't waver. She refused to be painted as irrational or angry. She refused to shrink. When they asked about her social media posts, she replied, I used my voice. That's
That's not a crime. When they asked why she hadn't come forward sooner, she replied, "I was afraid, but being afraid doesn't make what I found any less true." After the questioning, she stepped down and walked back to her seat. Every eye followed her. Even the judge's gaze lingered. The courtroom smelled like varnished wood and cold coffee. But underneath it all, Zora swore she could smell it. The stale scent of corporate fear. They were losing. Outside, the crowd had grown. Protesters, supporters, and media swarmed the courthouse steps. Signs read, "Zora spoke for us," and "Trial 14, Il Modern Tuskegee." Zora stood by the glass doors, watching from inside. Aaliyah came up beside her, holding a cup of tea. "You were brilliant," she said. "They tried everything to break you." "They'll try again," Zora replied. "But this time, they're the ones on trial." A lawyer stepped out from the conference room down the hall. "Verdict expected tomorrow," he said quietly. Zora nodded. The weight of it pressed down on her shoulders, but not as heavily as before. She had survived the smear campaigns, the arrest, the intimidation, and now her voice echoed in a room that once only spoke the language of money and silence. That night, Zora visited her grandmother's grave for the first time in a year. She knelt quietly, brushing away leaves and dirt from the name etched in stone. "They tried to quiet me, Grandma," she whispered, "but I remembered what you said. I kept my eyes open, and I saw everything." A gust of wind rustled the trees around her. She didn't need a reply. She already had one. The courthouse was packed. Journalists lined the gallery. Community organizers filled the benches. A swarm of cameras loomed outside the front doors, waiting like vultures. Inside, the tension was a living thing, coiled, breathless, ready to pounce. Zora sat quietly at the front of the courtroom, her hands folded, her gaze steady. The trial had lasted 3 weeks, but this moment, this decision, felt like the culmination of generations. Judge Langston entered and took his seat. The jury filed in. 12 strangers who had listened, watched, taken notes, and now held history in their hands. The clerk stood. In the case of the People versus Dynexia Pharmaceuticals, on the charge of willful suppression of clinical trial data and resulting wrongful deaths, how do you find? A pause. Then the jury foreperson cleared her throat. Guilty. Gasps. A few scattered sobs. Then silence. The judge nodded solemnly. The court acknowledges the verdict. Sentencing will follow, and recommendations for regulatory action will be delivered to the federal authorities. Zora didn't cheer, didn't cry. She simply exhaled and felt the weight of 1,000 unheard voices lift from her chest. Outside, the world erupted. Cheers rang through the plaza. People chanted her name. Reporters shouted questions. Banners waved high. Justice for Trial 14. No more shadows. And Zora spoke. We believed. Aaliyah grabbed her in a fierce hug. You did it. No, Zora said, voice low but firm. We did. Dr. Curry emerged from the building with Mina beside him, reporters surrounding them. Today is a victory, he said into a dozen microphones. But it is not the end. It's a warning to every corporation who thinks our pain is disposable. We are not experiments. We are not expendable. We are human, and we fight back. Over the following weeks, the fallout was seismic. Dynexia was ordered to pay $890 million in damages to the families affected by Trial 14. The FDA launched a full investigation into its other clinical trials. 3 additional executives were indicted. Congress scheduled emergency hearings on racial bias in medical testing. But the true change wasn't just legal. It was cultural. It was personal. Zora's inbox flooded with thousands of messages, some from people sharing their own stories of being silenced, some simply saying, "Thank you." She didn't answer them all. She couldn't. But she read every single one. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Zora stood outside the newly dedicated Daniels Equity and Ethics Center, a non-profit space funded by donations from across the country. It would serve as a watchdog for clinical trials, a legal aid office, and a sanctuary for whistleblowers afraid to speak up. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew hundreds. Aaliyah spoke first. "This building stands because a black woman refused to swallow injustice, because she believed truth was worth the cost, because silence is never safety." Then came Zora. She stood behind the podium, nervous and proud. The sun hit her face as cameras flashed. "When I exposed Trial 14, she began, "I wasn't trying to become a symbol. I was trying to stop a lie. But I've learned that truth doesn't walk alone. It needs allies. It needs faith. It needs noise. I paid a price. But it wasn't mine alone. That's why this space belongs to all of us." She looked into the crowd, at mothers, nurses, students, survivors. "This isn't the end," she said. "It's the beginning of louder truths." In the months that followed, Zora joined state panels on ethical testing. She spoke at universities. She helped other whistleblowers document their cases. She also took time for herself. She started journaling again, reading poetry, sitting by the lake without watching over her shoulder. And slowly, the nightmares stopped. One evening, she visited the community center where she'd first met Dr. Curry. A group of teens sat in a circle on the floor, working on a youth-led campaign for medical consent education. When they saw her, they lit up like streetlights. "You're the reason I want to study public health," one girl said shyly. Another added, "I used to think nobody would ever care what happened to people like us. Then you came." Zora smiled. "Never forget, justice isn't something you wait for. It's something you build." She walked home slowly that night, her path lit by a sky full of stars. Freedom had not come easy. It had cost her her job, her privacy, her peace. But it had also revealed something deeper: her power, her purpose, and her people. She had been underestimated, dismissed, threatened, and still she rose. The last line in her journal read, "They tried to silence me. Now my voice lives in every person who chooses to speak when it's hard. Freedom ain't free, but it's ours, and I won't let go."